talking about something called the universal wage. And the universal wage is basically where the governments around the world or businesses around the world will give us all just a certain amount of money where we can all just survive, and we don't need to worry about working anymore. That's my understanding of the universal wage. The reason why we're going to be discussing this is because I was just listening to Elon Musk, and in that book, the author claimed that Elon Musk, who's now creating robotics, the claim is that robots are going to be able to do what humans do very soon, which means that all the tasks that humans do are going to become obsolete, and as such, there will be this universal wage. So it's going to be an interesting discussion today, and let's kick it off with Brendan. How are you, Brendan?
I'm good, Paul. Good to be here, and obviously good to see you as usual, Adrian. I wrote a very short paper on universal basic income during the early days of the pandemic in 2020, when there was a bit of time, and I sat back and had a look at things. My view is twofold. The positive side of things is exactly what you've referred to. I don't believe technology is going to move so quickly that robots will replace most tasks in the short term, but let's assume they do. Let's just do a thought experiment that they actually do sometime over the next 20 years, and it gives us a little bit of transition time to organize things. If that is the case, it is people like Musk and, the large corporation controllers will still likely be in control, assuming that the robots don't actually eat us all for lunch. And that just creates a vacuum effect. It means that all the productivity, operations, transactions, commerce in the world will get sucked up into the wallets and bank accounts of a very, very small few human beings. Top of the pyramid stuff. However, that pyramid is only sustainable if those at the bottom, you, me, and everybody else, actually have the ability to actually pay for things, in that we exchange value, whether it's something as simple as food and rent or anything else. So therefore, the logical argument is that it's in Elon Musk's interest to introduce and to support a universal basic income, which gives society stability, which gives human beings emotional stability and security, and which allows a society to continue to kind of operate on a reasonably stable basis. Because the counter argument is that, hey, you know what? This has been done before in many, many, many ways. Not the universal basic income, but the circumstances that we faced. And possibly just over 100 years ago, the Russian Revolution of 1917 is a case in point, where for several hundred years, you had the people at the top and their serfs and their peasants and their slaves, by another word, and they were providing them that minimum survivable income. They were basically living in mud huts, and they were getting the smallest amount of food to sustain them. But you could call that a local basic income. When that became unsustainable, the peasants said, fuck this for a game of soldiers, end of the Russian state at the time. And as usual, I'm not saying that this will happen, can happen, should happen. But what I'm saying is that there are certain factors at play here that means that society stability and human security is what determines the future. And unless a universal basic income replaces the incomes that we currently get from working, the equation begins to fall apart. Now, that's a little bit of a mouthful, so let me just shut up for a second.
Okay, Brendan, I don't know about you, but is Adrian gone or wonky, or is Adrian nice and clear for you?
I can speak
Hello?
clearly. You need to move your mic closer to your neck.
Okay, well, I'll try and do that, but okay. Adrian, is that better? Do I just have to speak
better.
like this?
That's better.
Or not?
Yeah.
It's better. Right, you were too soft before.
All right, no, look, thank you. I'm going to have to sort this out when I'm not at home. Adrian, what's your view on the universal wage?
Well, like Brendan said, I mean, they really did have it under communism in most of the communist countries, not just Russia. Now, what they're doing is bringing the same idea effectively under capitalism without what communists did, which was basically giving everyone a guaranteed job or income. So, you know, in a lot of those communist countries, they were giving guaranteed employment. What Elon Musk is also saying is that there will be no jobs that need to be done by humans once AI is mature enough. Now that just, well, that's actually what everybody does wants anyway. They don't want to work. If you ask people, most of the time, they don't want to have to go to a job. They do want to work, but they want to work on their projects, their passions, their works of art. But I saw a funny cartoon in the last 24 hours, which actually had a whole crowd of people all walking in one direction, looking at their phones, obviously going to work. And on a park bench was an adult robot with a child robot, and the child robot was drawing a picture like a kid. Now, underneath that comment was, underneath that cartoon was a comment that if we have AI and robots creating art like they are at the moment, and they can also do our work, what is the purpose of humans? Because traditionally we've worked to be able to be philanthropists and sponsors. You would have the rich people would sponsor the artists to create music, to create paintings. That was how artists got paid traditionally. And it was a luxury item, but it was also something that, those rich people weren't skilled in or didn't have the patience for or the eye for. Now, if we have robots that are doing both, you have AI now creating images, music, written works. What is there left for humans to actually do? We can't work because there's no jobs. We also can't create works of art with passion because they won't be in demand.
Can I kind of challenge that, Adrian, a bit?
You don't need to chat. Well, you can challenge it. This is just my observation.
Yeah, but I am going to challenge a little bit of it, because while of course I agree with you that we work and we have worked for a long, long time, that long time is relative as well. If you take hunter-gatherer or prehistory societies and look at the Aboriginals in Australia, we don't know an awful lot about them pre-European settlement, but there are certain things that we can be reasonably sure of, that during certain times of the year, the only work that probably existed was putting food on the table. At other times, you would have had agriculture, you would have had trading, and you would have had maybe warfare. But what we consider work, which has gone from working 6.5 days a week to 6 days a week to 5 days a week, and now we're talking about 4 days a week, is a total function post-industrial revolution. And if you take the human existence goes back 250,000 years approximately, you're not even talking 100% of the time where we've got into our current situation and mindset. And my point here is that human beings are endlessly adaptable. So we never know what the future holds. But the likelihood is that some people will adapt very quickly. If you are richer, more intelligent, more educated, and more good looking, you'll probably adapt quicker. But in one way or another, people have to get on with the circumstances that they're pitched into. And if there is no traditional work in the next, call it 20 years again, um, human beings have got imagination. You certainly have a tiny proportion of humanity that can exist in their own heads, in their own imagination. Maybe that can be developed or not. To me, the fundamental thing comes back to not what we're going to do, but the framework within which we're going to do it. If there is a stable, secure environment, human beings will flourish. If there isn't a stable, secure environment, we have problems. And whether we do the kind of Skynet thing and beat the robots or the robots beat us, I have zero idea. But talking about works of art, just because you might not sell it for $1 million doesn't mean people won't make art. People make art like I write terrible poetry. Absolutely, you've both heard some of it probably. But that's it's never been commercial, obviously, and it never can be. But people will do things because it's part of their nature.
Of course they will. And in fact, if you go to most major cities and to some extent rural or suburban, there are people who are actually the modern version of hunters and gatherers at the moment. They hunt people, they carjack, the crime rate and foraging in our public parks and places is a modern form of hunting and gathering. So with the overlay of the housing crisis, which is not exclusive to Australia, it's all capital cities, that's the paradox, or you could also call it the insult, that for people to get cheaper utilities, we need to be condensed housing and have people live in high rise so that you can focus the utilities and energy in a smaller footprint, and at the same time not providing people with gainful employment that pays them enough to live there in that space or that city. So it is really an insult to the common man, in that in order to work, you need to go to those big cities. China's had it as well, and they actually introduced permits where you were not allowed to go into certain cities without a permit if you were from the countryside. Now they've built a high-speed rail network to do the opposite, to bring those people into the cities as fast as possible, and so that they can go home to their families as fast as possible and produce their productive work that is gainful employment in the bigger cities.
Yeah.
So,
Look,
no, just getting back, just getting, I don't know if you can hear you, but just getting back to, if robots took over and, the job that you do now, Brendan, a robot could be doing your job,
Yeah.
Adrian. A robot could be
Yeah.
doing your job. A robot could be doing my job.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to just step into that, what do you think your life would be like? And money wasn't an issue because you've got enough money to go and get the groceries. You've got enough money to, you'll have robo taxis. So you won't have a car anymore, because all you do is say, you order a car which will pick you up, drop you off, and then that car will go pick someone else up. You have a roof over your head. If you want to go overseas, you've got enough money to go overseas. If you just step into that, how do you think your life would be? And what do you think you would do, Brendan?
They've done a few experiments on universal basic income, and fundamentally they haven't worked because they're very small scale. They did a couple in Canada, they've done some in Finland and a couple of elsewhere. But one of the two kind of outcomes seem fairly obvious. The number one is it does reduce stress. If you take currently what you consider the lower paid, if you give people who previously have been under pressure security of, you know, a roof over your head and food on the table, that takes the fundamental stresses of life away. And when you're less stressed, you become more social. So I think the first thing that's likely to happen is that there's more human interaction. I like your cartoon about everyone going to work looking at their phones, Adrian, because that actually is the way the world works at the moment. Um, but if you look at the best time, if I look at, I won't talk about you guys because I wasn't there, the best times I've ever had, it's not that I've been on the top of Mount Everest or on the moon, it's where the people were. You always remember where you had the best time with people. And that's what makes us human more than anything else. You know, you clearly have stresses and strains in the modern family with generally both parents working, kids in school, technology, lack of communication. But having said that, you've always had stresses and strains within families throughout history, usually due to lack of food or lack of security of having a roof over your head for the majority of people. So take away the pressures. I think, I'm guessing, I'm hoping we become immediately more sociable. Personally, I know that I'd like to spend time on learning things that are of great interest to me and interacting with people who know more about those things. So it becomes, again, socially focused learning and education. Is there a concrete outcome? Um, the human condition. The country of Bhutan doesn't measure its economy with gross national product or gross domestic product or anything else. It measures gross happiness index. It's the only country in the world that does that. Now it's phenomenally poor, so I'm not sure if it works. But at the same time, can the human mind turn to people now that we don't have to worry about being at work for 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, or can I afford to put petrol in the car now that petrol prices have gone through the roof, etc. I would, assuming that the framework is positive, that the robots are benign, that the income is good, and I'll come back. There's one other factor I haven't mentioned yet I want to come back to. If we're working in a nice social environment, you will have the bastards. You will have the guys, Adrian, that you're talking about in the parks. You will have the hunters and the actual criminals. They will never go away. And that clearly will be a factor to be taken into account. But if the majority of people don't feel the stresses and strains that human beings have had throughout the ages, I'm hoping we'll become more sociable and more community and more human focused.
Amen.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Brendan. I think that there's always going. I think if everybody had the same salary to come in and all of that, there's always going to be somebody, especially men, want to outdo other men so that they
Yes.
can get the prettier woman.
Yes,
That
and a
will
prettier
never
car.
stop. That is a
Yeah.
well. If cars become robots or all of that, but I think ultimately it comes down to sex. As a man, we want to mate with basically as many women as we can, and the prettiest woman. And if everybody's the same, there's no desire to do that. And the pretty woman will, it just won't work. I don't think it will work. Now, Adrian, I know that you've got something to say about this because I kind of know what kind of mind you've got. You think
I don't know. Are there people
has.
around you? Are there people around you giving you weird looks?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
only
'cause this
7
is a
billion people listening to the podcast. It's okay.
this is
No, I
kind of a
mean around
sensitive area.
in your vicinity.
Oh, yeah, they are, but they can't hear what I'm saying, and if they can, bad luck.
The human condition is there is never enough.
Yeah,
There
that's a
is
problem.
that's our selfish gene. It's our human nature. It's communist or capitalist or everything in between. rural, agricultural, industrial, electronic, internet. There is never enough. And that's why capitalism is always a good lesser of the two evils in achieving that for everybody or the most people within time. But it's not the most people. We have a situation that is widely documented now about the 1%. That 1%, when it was on a country basis, resulted in revolution in so many countries around the world from the 20s until this year. If it happens on a national scale where you have 1% controls 99% of the resources or income generation, people get pitchforks or worse, and they try to level the playing field. That's what happened in France. What we are seeing now is not only an informed general public, but an enlightened general public. If I shouldn't have given the wrong impression, I do have a lot of faith in the human race. The general man on the street or woman on the street, certainly kids as well, are not just more intelligent in able to find information. They also look at things on a social, emotional, and enlightened playing field in terms of making a decision. And what they lack in a lot of cases is bravery to follow through on a decision that they know is right, and that is taking time. You see, our media, as much as everyone doesn't trust them, we are the media. We're able to take a phone and video something. We are Big Brother. If there 1% controls the world, Big Brother is really the other 8 billion people in the world that are able to stop them from running away. If they go to another country, the other country people on the same level will catch them. That's not to go out and lynch the rich or the 1%. That's why there is a lot of pressure for them to increase their philanthropy. And they did that 5 years ago. There was a story about the richer people in North America realizing that they had not given much back compared to other generations in their social class and financial class, and that they better do something because they know full well everyone knows where they live. They will just invade every castle and mansion to bring them down to size. So they know that. So what they're doing, you can see every government is trying to placate the workers and the general population. But go back to your original question about universal basic wage. Is all the language is wrong. People do want to work, and people, as you said, Brendan, will create and work, and that's the difference between work. What they don't want to do is go to a job where they're treated like a slave, whether it's in a
Yeah,
factory or a
yeah,
cubicle
yeah.
or a farm. And that is the case for letting robots and AI take over those menial jobs. I mean, if I don't want to quote him, but if you look at Jordan Peterson, what he says, we still have a situation in the world that men do all of the dangerous jobs despite the equality. And we haven't finished the equality equation between men and women in work and income generation. And now we have a third party, which is robots and AI, to look at their equity and equality. Now, is a robot to be paid the same as a human or more or less?
Robots don't get paid.
Can I, I'm always delighted to put a little pin in bubbles of people like Jordan Peterson who pronounce certain things. Do you know what the most dangerous job in the world is? Single most dangerous job.
I will say no, I don't.
Correct. Because it's not anything that you're thinking of or he's referring to. It's fucking giving birth. Now, there's not one single man in the history of the world, to my knowledge, has ever done that. So Peterson can take his wacky theories and put a little bit of science and reality around them, because that's rubbish.
Well, this will get you views, Paul.
So I love the fact that Brendan's gone off the track. Adrian said that the most dangerous job to man, and Brendan's just taking it to women. So
Mankind, humanity.
But I do
humanity,
still,
right?
I still have a lot of faith in the human race. Like Brendan said, we're not stupid.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
we don't let people get away with murder. Look at the pushback in the recent thing in the Middle East. And I saw a beautiful picture of someone holding up a placard that said, "Don't do to other people what the Nazis did to you," and not mentioning any names.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it is, in the first, the first cover of a John le Carre novel that you and I know what all children learn: to whom harm is done, do harm in return. And you can look around the world, oppressed people or people treated wrongly, whether it's genocide or whether it is bad wages or anything, they will turn around and do it to other people. And you can even see it once people become better income, how they treat people who are, maybe regarded as beneath them. But I'll tell you one observation I had with a conversation, everybody on the weekend, Paul, and that is the development of a lot of Asian countries in the last 50 years they've allowed their workers to get ahead on income by actually giving them accommodation on site. I know we do it in Australia with the fly in, fly out guys, but if you look at Asia, where they have dormitories at factory sites so that people don't need to waste money on commuting, they don't need to waste money on accommodation. Now, what we have in a country where most people are not involved in agriculture or industry, but they're all going to offices or they're in retail or commerce, is that not one of them, despite their low wages, is working for an employer that would accommodate them and give them their accommodation, which would actually spur things.
And if I may follow that point, Adrian, it goes back to, I was referring, there's one other thing I wanted to comment on in relation to universal basic income. Okay, let's say the world is a lovely place. Let's say the robots are all good. Let's say we're all having coffee between 9 o'clock and 11 with our 200 best buddies every Wednesday morning, and the sun is shining. The question is, what's the mechanism to get my rent, my groceries, my transport into my account from the robot who's actually in that sweatshop in what used to be Bangladesh, but now is, wherever. It's just a warehouse on the edge of any city making t-shirts or shoes. What's the mechanism to do that? I have an answer to that. It's called taxation. Because if you make a product, there's a value to that product. Clearly, you've got the cost of production, you've got the profit that goes to the enterprise or the individual, and then usually you have a contribution to society, which we call tax. Unless that taxation element is structured very effectively and administered very fairly, you can't put me in my coffee shop at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, even if that robot dog is working 26 hours out of 25 every day. So that taxation element and that reorganization of society goes right back to my point. I think Elon Musk is wrong. I don't think that we can get to the robots actually taking all our jobs in a short period of time, for the simple reason that we can't put the frameworks and the mechanisms in place to make it effective. And if that robot makes 10,000 t-shirts every hour, but can't actually distribute them because I've got no money, and there isn't any mechanism to get them to the Mongolian or the Icelander or even the guy who lives in Brisbane. The concepts are great so far, but I haven't heard any practical mechanisms to actually advance this discussion beyond it's a good thing.
Have you both
Well,
seen
look,
the movie Ready Player One
No, I haven't. No.
by Steven Spielberg? In that movie, and if you have kids, you should definitely watch it, Ready Player One. It discusses the concept of how humans live in a world where a lot of things are automated and robots. And one of the ways people, there's an interesting scene where they don't have enough money or credits, if you like. And what
Yeah.
you can do is you can go in to a center where they lock you in a phone booth, effectively, with fixed goggles, VR goggles on, and headphones. And you have to stand there and listen and watch ads and information until you have worked up the credits that you can claim, and then you can be released and go out and spend them and buy a hamburger or something. It is pitched as a kids movie, but actually as an adult and informed like myself, it was very telling, because the concept of robots taking over will take us back to ancient world stuff, where it's the man with the most oxen will be the man with the most robots.
Yeah, you see,
yeah,
and this is the human condition we've always been aware of.
Exactly, and overpowering a weaker class of species or um, anything.
all right, guys, we're going to have to leave it there because it's the top of the half an hour. It's been a very interesting discussion, but one thing that the accountant amongst us, Brendan, always comes back to tax. So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a debate, perhaps between Adrian and Brendan and Sally, where somebody will take the view that tax is good, and the other one could take the view, Brendan thinks tax is good. Personal tax. We're not talking corporate tax, Brendan. We're talking personal tax.
Corporate tax is better,
And
but personal tax is good too. Yeah.
yeah, all right, okay. Well, maybe I'll take the opposing side because I don't think we should be taxed on providing for our family. I don't think that's right.
Great. I would
Um,
look forward to that conversation. I can tell you about taking my kids to a national park, several national parks in Thailand with my Thai wife, and having the officials at the gates of the park test my children's language ability in Thai as to whether they pay the high price as a
Yes.
foreigner or the lower
Yeah.
price as a Thai. And we can chuck all that in as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
we'll
I've
do
seen
that.
that.
But we've got to call it for today because look at the time. But thank you, guys. I thought it was a very interesting discussion. I think the consensus is that the human condition can't handle a universal wage. So, um, so I don't think it's going to come in. And now, if we have a look at some countries that have, socialistic countries, when you give things to people, it always ends up in a civil war or world war. Have a look at Yugoslavia, and that's a good case study as to what might happen. All right, guys, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
That's
All right.
great. Let us know how it goes.